Good morning. We're learning as is Chosr for Shlema for Ilan Chaya Basarach. We're at the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Zayin Omid Beis, right in the middle. Ivarin be'ivarin, be'ivarin b'alei mumin. We're still talking about mixtures. When you mix something that's kosher with something that's not. So if you have a mixture of the limbs of an oila that's supposed to be burnt on the mizbech, and then you have another oila that was brought of a Baal Mum, so it's not a kosher carbon. We had this sheet of Rebbe Eliezer before. He says, although we would have to say normally we'd say it's not bottle, right? A aver is something that's not bottle. If for whatever reason it has a chashivas, it's not bottle. So let's say you have one aver of Baal Mum, and 100 or 100 avarim of not Baal Mum. So we would say you can't be makravit. But he says if someone by mistake, one kohen went ahead and he took from this mixture of 101 avarim, or let's say heads of different karbanos, and only one of them was a Baal Mum, and he was makravit mistakenly. He wasn't supposed to because it's not bottle, and if he's not allowed to, if he did so nevertheless, so then we say he can go ahead and be makrav the rest of them, because we will ascribe that we will say there's a possibility that the one he already brought was the possible one. So since there's a possibility that there's no more iser, there's no more pasala carbon, pasala roishin in this group, we can then reinstate the din betel. Means even though we wouldn't be mevatel l'chatchila, once you already have one out of the group, we said before we had a similar where if it was destroyed. Now we're talking about if you were makav one of them on the mizbech. So now we have a scenario in which the possible one was already nikraf, so then we could say it's bat. Karayin shalachem head, you could call it karayim, but he says it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't have to be the heads. It could be that it could be the same thing with the legs. Now, I mean, what the point the Mishnah is making is if you have we're talking about all the limbs of the animal, right? You have the heads and the legs and all the different parts. So if you know that you are makar of you have a bundle of mixed limbs, heads and feet and forelegs and back legs, if you can see which one was nikrav, if you just was makar one of the heads, that will allow you to be makar all the other heads, but it won't let you be makar the legs. Because the head, only we could say that you were makar the head of the one that was possible. The leg is still mixed in there, so you can't be makar. Chum say they don't agree with this heter. They say even if you are makar all of the animals by mistake, and all that's left is one, so it's a 99% chance. First of all, there was only one of psul in these 100. So it was a 1 in 100 that anyone that you would take would be possible. And then you were makar 99 of them by mistake, and all that's left is one. Even then, the Chum say you're still not allowed to, since it wasn't bottle, it was never bottle, so you have to, you're not allowed to bring it. You still have to burn it. Omer Rebbe Eliezer, lo hichshe, Rebbe Eliezer the Tana, lo hichshe Rebbe Eliezer, that which Rebbe Eliezer in the Mishnah said that you can be makriv the other roishim if you were makriv one of them. El shnayim. That even that heter of Rebbe Eliezer in the Mishnah is limited. You can only be makriv the other roishim once you're makriv one. If you now are being makriv two, you have to have two factors saying that this is not the roish that was a Baal Mum. It has to first of all be that out of the 100, it was 1 in 100. It's really, you need three factors. First of all, it has to be that it's 1 in 100, so it would be batal. But it's not batal for whatever reason because it's chashiv. Then you have to have that you, by mistake, were makriv one of them, so you could say that it's no longer part of this group. He says, even then, and this is such an interesting thing, he said you also have to be makriv two at the same time. So you could say, even now, even let's say that the one that was nikra before was not. But now I'm taking two, so I know that for sure one of these two is for sure not the one that was the Balmum. So that gives us an extra level of comfort that we can go and be makriv. But just one at a time, you would not be allowed to makriv. Master Rav Yirmiyah asked on this, the Chachamim say, even if he was makriv all of them except for one of them, it gets burnt. But it's mashma that Rabbi Eliezer would argue and say, no, if it's Yamakov all except for one, then it doesn't go to the Beis HaSreifa. But we're saying he has to be Makov two at the same time. So even Rabbi Eliezer would be maskim in that case. If you Makov all of them except for one, they only left with one, the Chum would not, according to Rabbi Eliezer and his limitation of Rabbi Eliezer, even Rabbi Eliezer would be maskim in that case, that it's not going to be, it's going to be Yisrael at Beis HaSreifa. No, what it means that even if there's only left one, means that one pair, like Rabbi Eliezer, that Amiris explained in Rabbi Eliezer only said his heter. If there are two, we're talking about there was one pair of two left. Okay, that was the easy part. Now we're getting into the, for me, always confusing topic of liquids that are mixed into liquids. We get into the topic of mim b'minoi and mim b'she'ein minoi. Okay. Zok the Mishnah. Now we're talking about, until now we were talking about animals that got mixed in, or ivarim. Now we're talking about dam. You brought a carbon, you shechted a carbon, and you were makabel the dam and a kli, and now all of a sudden, all sorts of shenanigans ensue. Dam shenis arav b'mayim, which the Gemara is going to explain in a minute. That means you have dam, that water, perfect timing. We're just starting the Mishnah that I gave a lot of foreshadowing that I'm going to get confused about. You're going to try to sort this out with me over the next couple of days. We're at the Mishnah, the bottom of Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. Dam shenis arav b'mayim. The Gemara is going to explain. This is talking specifically if you have water that got mixed into your dam. You have dam that's of a carbon, right? Whenever we're talking about dam here, it means carbon dam. It got mixed in with water, which obviously water is not something that's brought on the mizbeach. If yesh by maris dam, if the dam retains its appearance as that of dam, kosher. It remains kosher. You can you could be zayrik it on the mizbeach. It's all, everything is good in the world. Dam is defined by its appearance. So if it looks like dam, it's still going to be dam, even if you have 10 times as much water as the dam. We don't care. It looks like dam. I mean, I guess I would think that there is some objective standard that we could look at. We would know probably if it's 10 times as much water, it no longer looks like dam. It looks like colored water at that point. But whatever the shear is, the Gemara is, the way the Rishonim explain it, it means even if it's more than a roiv, even if it's mostly water, it still can have the appearance of dam. But we'll just look at the water as if, you just threw something on the mizbeach that we can disregard. We don't say that the water is mevatel the dam. Nis'arev b'yayin, if the dam of the carbon got mixed together with wine. So now we have a problem. We no longer can say that its appearance remains that of yayin, of dam, because yayin the assumption is yayin is red, so it's not recognizable. You can't look at it and see if it's dam. Maybe it's really just the appearance of wine. So what do? The Gemara is going to have a machlokes about this, but at this point, we're saying we look at the yayin as if it's mayim, and you make the same judgment like we did with the mayim. When the mayim got mixed into the yayin, into the dam, we said we look at if there's enough mayim that it would the dam would lose its appearance. We say this klal of royin, which is going to be a very controversial topic in the Gemara, whether we say this topic of royin. But this Mishnah asserts we say royin. We look at the yayin as if it was mayim. If there'd be enough mayim that would dilute the appearance of the dam, that no more looks like dam, if you have that amount of yayin, that if it were mayim, it would dilute the appearance. We look at it as if it's something different than what it actually is. Then it's going to be puzzle. But if not, as long as there's a small enough amount of yayin, even though it's a roy of yayin, it still will be a kosher carbon. We'll just disregard the yayin. The Mishnah continues. Nis'arav b'dam behema or b'dam hachaya. If rather than the dam of this carbon being mixed in with wine or with water, like in the previous two cases, it got mixed with blood of a regular carbon, right? Someone had shechted his sheep, or he shechted a deer, and he has that dam on the side. It's kosher dam. Again, we look at this dam just like the yayin. We look at it as if it's water, because you're not going to be able to see in this dam whether you still see the original dam, because they're both the same thing. So you say, right. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ein dam mevatel dam. Rabbi Yehuda says, it's a min b'minai. We all know there's such a rule that min b'minai is not batel, and he says it's not going to the dam your not kosher dam, but your kodshim dam is not going to be mevatel this other dam. I'm sorry, was that a question? No, there's no one there. So he says it's never going to become possible at all. And even if you have, as long as you have one drop of the kodshim dam that's there, we're going to say this new dam is never going to be mavatal, even not just like we said before, if it's enough to you lose the appearance. We say min b'minai, we say ein batal, and therefore the non-eligible dam will never be mavatal. The original dam will just disregard this other dam, this new dam that was added, and he could be zayrik the dam of the kodshim on the mizbeach without a problem. Nis'arav b'dam psulim. Now we're going to move on, and I'll give you a hint. This part is not really relevant to the first part of the Mishnah. Now we're going to be talking about takanas chachamim, as will become clear from the end of the Mishnah. Nis'arav b'dam psulim. If your dam of your kosher carbon got mixed with the dam of a puzzle thing, something that was a balmum or noiser or what was the Rashi gives a b'dam psul going berevei v'nirva b'nishat chutl zmane yachot from koimai. The dam has a psul of carbon that it was brought. He did it with the machshavas chutl zmane of pigol or machshavas chutl koimai or revei v'nirva yishbach la'ama. Then you have to pour it all out. And similarly, b'dam hatamsis. If you remember, there's two types of dam that comes out when you shecht an animal. There's the dam hachayim, when you first you cut the simonim. There's a spurt of blood that is the life blood of the animal, and then afterwards, the blood that oozes out afterwards is not considered that's called dam hatamsis. It's not the life blood, and that is puzzle. That's not eligible for zrikas hadam. If that got mixed in with the actual dam which is the life blood of the animal, which is kosher for the zrika, yishbach la'ama. Again, just like the dam psulim, you have to pour it out into the disposal. Rabbi Eliezer machshir. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees. I think Rabbi Eliezer is disagreeing about I think he's being chaylik on both of them. I think he's talking about the dam atamsis. The dam atamsis, he says, does not passel the dam that is the actual dam of the behema, of the chayim. But the Mishnah finishes just to give. This is why we said before that this is all a derabbanan. These exeris that the Gemara is going to explain later. Imloy nimlach. If the kohen went ahead and he didn't follow these rules that we said, if there's dam psulim or dam tamsis, according to the Tanakama, that you're not allowed to be zareket, and he went and he was zareket anyway. But Nasan, and he put on the mizbeach kosher. It's going to be kosher, but the Eved, this is only a takonis chachavim, this last din, and therefore it will still remain kosher.
Imagine because of why you think dam tamsis is worse than dam chaya behema.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a gzeira. We're going to see it's going to be a gzeira, just like the dam of something that's the psul is just specifically as far as carbon, right? Dam tamsis is not. Yeah, it's from a kosher animal. We're not making it not kosher. We're saying it's not. It's specifically not eligible for a carbon.
So
the dam of chulin, it's not. You weren't makdash it, but it's not a psul in kachim. It's a psul because you weren't makdash it in the first place. These are things like chutz l'zmanei, chutz l'mkaimai. I guess Reveya B'Nirva is. These are psulim that make it that you're not allowed to. It's ineligible as a carbon. Oh, we'll see. We'll see later on. I think dam atamsis is a pasuk that we say dam atamsis is not eligible for kachim. Now you're asking, even if it's not eligible for kachim, why is it any different than dam chulin? Okay, we'll see we'll see what the reason is why it can't be, why it's not batal. It's not mevatel, I should say. Amr B'chia Barabam Rabbi Yochanan. So we're going back to the first din in the Mishnah, right? We had said in the Mishnah, the lashon of the Mishnah was dam shenis arav b'mayim im yesh b'maris dam kosher. We said if you have dam, that the way it sounds when you read the Mishnah is you have dam that got mixed into water. As long as you have enough dam that it still has a maris dam, it's going to be kosher to bring on the mizbeach. Contrary to the way the Mishnah reads it, it sounds like the dam fell into the water. He said that would not work. If you have dam, your dam of your carbon falling into a bucket of water, even if it later becomes more than the water, it's still going to become possible. It has to be the other way around, that the water fell into the dam. But if the dam fell into the water, rishon bottle. When you pour the normal, at least in the normal way of pouring, I think halacha l'mais depends how you pour it, but the normal way of pouring is you pour a stream of dam into the water, it comes in a thin stream, one drop at a time. So you have a barrel of water. Even if you pour it in a barrel of dam, it would then take on the appearance of dam, but each individual drop, as it comes in, it becomes bottle. And then when the next drop comes in, that dam was already bottle. So every individual drop is always going to be bottle to the water. That means the first drop that went in, it got the din of water when it was bottle. So every succeeding drop up until the end is all going to be bottle. So when you pour the dam into the water, it's always going to be puzzle because the dam is never going to have enough. Now, if you would dump it all in at one shot, if you turn the whole thing over and just plop it in at one shot, ein chanami, I think halacha l'maisa, that would be kosher. But the normal way of pouring is it goes one drop at a time. So therefore, we said the Mishnah is talking about the other way around. Amra papa, well, inni kisay einikein. There's a din that if you have dam of a behema, there's a mitzvah to be mechasa the dam, but if the dam was mixed with water to a sufficient amount that it no longer has a din of dam, then you don't have the din, you don't have the mitzvah of a mechasa that dam. We're not going to say this. We're not going to say so. we just said that if you have the dam going into the mayim, each bit of dam as it goes in, it's going to be puzzle. And now Rapapa is explaining what's the reason why it becomes puzzle as it goes in, because even though in the end you're going to end up having enough dam in it that it could be reconstituted and say, oh, now we have enough dam that it's going to be mavatal the mayim, or we can disregard the mayim because it still has the appearance of dam. We say it was already dachi. Once the mayim was pushed aside, when you put the dam into the mayim, at that point it was puzzle. So then you couldn't use it. So even if it later gets reconstituted, we have the din of dicha that we've seen throughout the last few prokim, that in kachim, something that was pushed aside, that it wasn't able to be used, it can't later become kosher. So he says, so Papa points out that this din that we just said, that you can't pour the dam into the water because then it will become dachi, that's only in the din of kachim. But the Indian kisui, even if you have dam that you poured into water, if at the end there's more dam than water, and we could say now the appearance of the whole thing is that of dam, and therefore it should have the mitzvah of kisui adam, we're not going to care that you poured it in a little bit at a time, even though it would theoretically be batal at that point, and therefore it'd be unable to have a mitzvah, it's kisui adam. But when later on it becomes eligible, There's no din of dichui legabe mitzvahs. There's no, the din of dichui does not apply to kisei adam. It only applies to kachim, and that's the reason why it has to be the dam. The water fell into the dam.
So what is mitzvah is referring to
Kisei adam,
and not kisei adam.
No, the other way around. Mitzvahs means there's no dichui by mitzvahs, meaning by kisei adam, which is just a mitzvah. It's not kachim. Amr Shlakish. This one's a little bit of a mind bender. Amr Shlakish. Hapigol v'hanoiser v'hatome. Shabolun zebezeh v'achon. Pigol and noiser and kachim that atame. We know all of these things. They're going to be chayiv. You're going to be chayiv if you eat them. Pigol and noiser are both going to be chiyuvei karas. You're going to bring chatas if you do them. If you took two of these three things, let's say let's leave tamei aside. We'll talk about pigol and noiser. If a person had a kazayis of pigol, which is chayiv karas, and a kazayis of noiser, which is also on its own chayiv karas, and he put them in his mouth and he chewed them and he ate them, he's going to be pater for both noiser and for pigol. It sounds bizarre, right? If you just took one kazayis of pigol, you'd be chayiv. But somehow you doubled your isser, and you took another kazayis of a different isser, you're going to be potter. Why is that? Because the Gemara says it's always going to be, and the Gemara is going to explain it a little bit more, just sort of agav, but I'm going to explain it in advance, because we say that you're always going to have, when you're chewing things in your mouth, the Gemara looks at it as you're going to get into at least a minimum of two separate entities in your mouth. You have two chunks of things, two pieces of meat. These are both meats that, or at this point, actually, we're assuming it could be nicer of a mincha and meat of a chatas. But you're chewing the two of them together. You're going to end up with two things in your mouth. One, l'chayr, is going to be a roiv of one, and the other one's going to be a roiv of the other. So we'll say it's not going to be exact. We're talking about here l'chayr, I think, where they're both about a kazayis each. So what you're going to end up with, let's say you're going to have one chunk, each was a kazayis.
As you're chewing it?
As you chew it in your mouth, before you swallow it.
This isn't swallowing or chewing. Remember we had this with
well, that was lagabi tumah. Now we're talking about the isser of eating. I think the isser of eating is when you swallow.
So
it's gonna be, you don't swallow the whole two kazesim all in one shot. You first chew it up, and now you got these different bulks in your mouth.
You don't swallow kazayas straight either, right? If you just eat kazayas of
right. Even the kazayas you wouldn't. You chew it.
You'd also know that's because they're still mixing together.
Well, I'm gonna tell you. Let me tell you why. If you mix them together, what's the problem if they mix together? You still have two kazesim of isser. The problem is like this: you're gonna have let's say, 1.5 kazesim in one group bundle, and the other bundle is going to be half a kazayis. And the bundle that's because you're never going to have that when you chew it, it's going to come to be half a kazayis of each in each bundle. Let's say it's going to be 90% of the pigel and 10% of the nicer, and it's going to be a little more than a kazayis, let's say, and that's going to be 1.1 kazesim. The other one's going to be 0.9 kazesim with that's also going to be 90% nicer and 10% pigel. So in that case, we're going to say the 1.1 kazesim mixture is going to be a isser of pigel, and that's going to remain. And the other one is going to be a 0.9 kazayis mixture, where it's the nicer is going to be vatal the pigel, but that's not a kazayis, so it's not going to be able to be us. And then we get into an issue that it's going to be hasra safek. You don't know what you're being master from. You can't just make hasras willy-nilly, saying, I'm giving you hasra for both nicer and pigel. I don't know which one you're being over on, but I know you're going to for sure be over on one. You have to know what you're giving hasra on. And since you can't know in his mouth which bundle is the one that has more than a kazayas of isser in it, you don't know if the pigel ended up with the roiv with it or the nicer, so therefore it's always going to be a hasra safek. So it's like magic, right? The guy, if he would have just popped a kazayas of nicer into his mouth, he'd be chayiv. If he would have just finished chewing it and chewed the next kazayas of a nicer or pigel, whatever the second one is, he'd be chayiv a second chatas. But somehow he does them together, and now he doesn't have to bring any chatas. He's not chayiv karas at all, because there's no hasra. I guess we're not talking about a chatas. We're talking about being chayiv karas. Zok the Gemara.
Yeah, I think of course there's a need as well. So
yeah, it's just there's a malchus.
Malchus, okay.
Mosav Rabbah. I'm sorry, I left out. Shema Mina, and this is where the Gemara explains sort of backhandedly how we came to this conclusion. Shema Mina Tlas. We see from this what this din that we just said three things. Shema Mina Isur Mevatlan Zeh. We're saying over here, right, that in each bundle in his mouth, whichever is greater, if the nicer is greater, the nicer is mevatel the pigel. If the pigel is greater, it's mevatel the nicer. But you see, these are two isurim. One might say that you can only say a din of bittul when you have an isser together with a heter. We could say the isser is mevatel the heter is mevatel the isser. Where do we know that there's such a thing as two isurim could be mevatel? Maybe since they have the same classification. They're both isurim. They're not mevatel one another. But you see that there is such a concept. Ushma mina noisen tam beroiv lav do'iraisa. As we all know, all of us who have wives in kitchens know, if anything is noisen tam, right? If you put a little bit of treif into something, if it gives a taste to it, noisen tam is asus, right? You can't use your oven if you used it. Why can't you use your oven? Because it's going to get a tam into the walls of the oven of milchiks, and when you use a fleshik, it's going to put a tam into your fleshiks. It's all nice and tam. But this din that a nice and tam against a roiv, right? Even though obviously when you have a tam of milk in your oven, it's only a very small percentage. But a nice and tam can overcome a roiv. That din that a nice and tam is going to be usher, even against the roiv of the heter, is not a deraisa. Because if that was the case, we should say that in these two, let's say you had the two chunks in his mouth, and one was nicer, and one was pigel. We're saying it's less than a kazayas, but who cares? You should still have it. Should still be nice and tam. So why would it be usher out the tam? Right, because the part that's more than a kazayas certainly is going to have the tam of the other isser, even though it doesn't have a rive of it. You say the actual, let's say it was 90% pigel and 10% nicer. So we're saying it's going to the nicer is going to become bottle. Why don't you say that the nicer still gives the tam? Let's say the nicer is meat, and the pigel is silas, is flour from a mincha. Why don't we say that the nicer gives the tam into the pigel? So Zevachim says you don't say that. It's not a deraisa, it's only midrabanan, and that's why you can't get malchus in it. Ushma mina hasra safek lo shma hasra, and obviously it has to be. We know that there's a machlokes hasra hashma safek shma hasra. It's dependent on saying that hasra safek is no shma hasra. Otherwise, who cares about in the end you were chayiv for whatever you were chayiv for. You can make hasra on both, and he'll definitely be mechayiv at least one lav. Masav Rav, Frekt Rav. Rav is asking on the second din that we said, Neis and Tam B'Roiv is only Midrabban. He asks a kasha. Asa Isa Menachitin u Mina Iris. If someone made a bread using flour of wheat together with rice flour, so the din is that there's no din of making of hafrashas challah on rice. There's only a din of hafrashas challah on dagan from chitin. Im yesh batam dagan, as long as this mixture of wheat flour and rice flour, even if it's roiv rice flour, im yesh batam dagan chayaves b'challah, you're still going to be mechayev in challah because the nice and tam is enough to be mechayev achiyev challah. So you see that nice and tam is a zach. We do respect the nice and tam. Even though most of it is iris. It's like maybe that's also the rabbanon. Our whole var was that we see that nice and tam is roiv is not the raisa. So maybe this din that you have to do hafrashas challah is also the rabbanon that hafrashas challah. So no, that can't be. I'll tell you what about the seifa of that same Mishnah, which I don't know. We should have brought that in the first place. If someone eats this mixture of roiv rice flour that just has a tam dagan, and he baked it into a matzah, so he didn't make a chametz. He made a mixture of rice and wheat matzah out of it. He could be yitzis chiyuv of eating matzah on Pesach. Now that you can't be yitzis chiyuv matzah with the rabbanon dika matzah. It has to be that because it has the tam of dagan, the tam of the wheat, that makes it into the midaraisa challah. So you see that nois and tam is midaraisa, makes something into makes it into the tam, even though it's roiv of the other thing. So the Gemara, Elamai, what do we have to say? So we have, why are we saying over here that legabi the iris with the dagan, that we're going to say nice and tam is going to be respected, but we're saying legabi the person who ate a mixture of two things, we're going to say nice and tam is only midrabanan. So yes, it's a big difference. That which we say that something is nice and tam, that's you have two separate timing. You have a tam of dagan in iris, so it's nice and tam, or like you have your milk in your oven, so it's a nice and tam into the meat. There's no such thing as fleishika milk, so it's always going to be a different min. But min b'minoi beruba. But when you have min b'minoi, which is the case of the person who we're saying now that the person who was eating nicer together with pigel, it's talking about where they were both basa. So then you have a mixture of two of the same tastes. Then you don't say a nice and tam. Then since they're both the same taste, it has to go by roiv. You're gonna have if you have a roiv, then you're gonna be able to ignore the tam because the tam is not giving over a tam. They're both the same tam. Oh boy, I really ate up the time today. Okay, I'll just say the kasha and then we're gonna review it tomorrow. Frek the Gemara, Benisha. Then we said a rule that min b'she'enei minei is nice and tam, but min b'minei it has to be a roiv in order to be possible, in order to asa. Let's say whenever you have a tam of something of min which is b'minoi, it should be treated as if it's a min b'she'ena minoi. It's say we should always say nice and tam even by min b'minoi. The Tanam because of our Mishnah. Nis'ar b'yayin roy noisei ki'ilu umayim. Our Mishnah had said that if you have a dam from a carbon and you mix into it yayin, and yayin does not make the dam lose its appearance of dam, so we have no way of judging whether it's a min as far as their appearances. It's min b'minai. It has the same appearance. Nevertheless, we say roy. We say we recharacterize. We look at this yayin. We say this yayin, even though it's the same as it has the same appearance as the dam, we always say let's not look at it. Let's look at it as if it's mayim and decide if it's enough mayim that it would passel, that it would be mavatal the dam. Then it's going to be bottle. But if it's not, even if it's twice as much mayim, twice as much yayin, which would be, and we have the same thing as if it was mayim, that if it was twice as much mayim, it's not going to be bottle as soon as it's roiv. It's not going to say that the yayin is mavatal the dam as soon as it's roiv. It has to be enough that it would take away the appearance of the yayin. So we say the concept of royin, that we recharacterize the thing to make it that we could look at it as if it's mavatal, not with tam, but with the actual thing. My love, roy no yayin kiyumayim. So loy. No, maybe it's roy. Okay, whatever. Let's get back to this tomorrow.
What's the question? The question is.
The Gemara's question is.
So what's the concept of roy? Because if we're saying right now, this case, we only say mina, but if it's not mina, we don't say the concept of roy.
No, we only say nice and tam when it's min b'she'ena mina.
Right.
But if it's bin mina, then we don't say nice and tam. Then we say you need a rive in order to be usher, in order to.
What's the question from rive?
So why do we say, even though it's min b'minai, so we're considering wine, it shouldn't be min b'minai. Well, wine and blood is essentially can be considered min b'minai l'gabi its appearance. We're saying whether it has the appearance of over there, the dependence of whether it's dam. It depends on whether it has the appearance of dam, and the ayin has the same appearance as dam. So we're saying, but for purposes of determining of whether how much yayin is needed to be mevatel this din of dam, and say that it's no longer treated as dam, that you could bring it as a carbon. Instead of saying that it's as soon as it's a roiv of yayin, it becomes batel, which is what you would say. We say no, it has to have. We look at it as if it's water, and you need much more than roiv water in order to take away the appearance of dam. We say ryan. So why don't we say the same thing? L'gabi min b'minai, when you have an isser in a heter, when you have one isser, whatever the case may be, when you have an isser going into a heter, even though it's min b'minai, so we would say that it doesn't go b'taima, it goes b'roiv. Let's say no, it should be, we see roy say as if it's two separate things, and make it as soon as it has a tam, it should pass.
They don't. I hear.
It's not exactly the same roy.
It's really far from it. It's like
two separate things.
No.
Well, it's getting late, so let's see the Rashi. There's Nanisha min b'mina k'min b'she'enemi, keeping the heche the kaimina and ataima. Kol kama of taima lebatel. Since we say whenever we go on tam, whenever it gives a tam, it's going to not be batel. Kilek can make him nami, even when there isn't, even when it's min b'mina, but you can't see the tam. Amay mizalzelin isurei lemar levatlam b'roiv. Why are we so quick to say that even if you have a tam of min b'minai, and say we can disregard this tam because it's not recognizable? Name a royan iluhaya min b'she'ena minai. Had it been a min b'she'ena minai, hayesh by hakataima. Had it been a separate thing, we would have recognized the tam. Hashnami, why are we saying that min b'minai is not going to be also with just the tam? Because you don't recognize the tam. Just like we said in our Mishnah that even though when you have dam with yayin, you can't actually see the effect of the dam on the water. We don't see that the dam ever got bottle in the water. As soon as it's rive, therefore we have to disregard. We really should disregard the chazusa, the appearance, because there's no difference in the appearance. We say no. We in order to do the calculation, we look at it as if it's something which it is recognizable. So do the same thing over here. Even though you can't see the tam, you can't taste the tam of something which is the same min, let's look at it as if it's something else, translate it into something where there would be a tam, and calculate it like that. That's the idea. The idea is we just have a technical problem of recognizing the different tam here, because they both happen to have the same tam. Just like over there, we have a technical problem. We can't see the difference in appearance because they're both the same. So say, okay, so we'll just make the calculation as if it was something that it was recognizable. So why don't we say the same thing like Ave Tam? It's okay. It's really late. I have to stop here.
One is for color. You want to spritz on the base of mikdash on the mizbeach. The other one's to have a taste.
But you're a